It's Friday, August 4th, 2017. Our panelists today, Jonathan Breckenridge, an aerospace engineer, and our legal expert, Frank Ward. I'm Dale Jackson, and you're watching Yellowhammer TV Live. Welcome to Yellowhammer TV Live. We have a lot to talk about. Is it the beginning of the end of the Trump administration or the end of the beginning of the Trump administration? Some kids in the state are back in school, and of course some legislators want to get involved in setting your kids' calendar. So while we get ready to talk about that, let's go to the headlines. We have two big stories today about Donald Trump, and in any other administration, these things could happen 6 months apart, and they would both be humongous news. Today, not so. Let's first start with these transcripts. We have another leak, and the leak is a bunch of phone calls that Donald Trump had with foreign leaders where he lied. So what's the story here? The illegal leaks, Trump lying yet again, or both? Let's jump to our experts here. Jonathan, first off, I'm going to say this. If Trump had not BS'd about these phone calls in the first place, we wouldn't be having this conversation because people would not have leaked them. So what's the bigger story here? The leak or the content of the leaks?
I think it has to be the lying. Trump and his administration has got to stop lying about stupid things that don't matter. There's no reason to lie about these things, and without the lying, the leaks don't mean anything.
In these calls, he's talking to the Australian Prime Minister, and he's talking about a deal where we're taking in a bunch of refugees, and he doesn't want to do it, and he realizes it's a little bit of a violation of his pledge about refugees, so he's a little upset about that. Later on, they both come out and say, oh, what a great conversation. In another conversation, he's talking to the president of Mexico and saying, come on, you don't have to say you're going to build the wall, but stop saying you're not going to build the wall. Which one of these is more surprising for you, the content of the leak, Frank? Which one's more surprising?
Of the calls? Well, I don't know. They're both pretty surprising. I actually thought the conversation with the Prime Minister of Australia is the one that's the most concerning. We already knew Trump was overly concerned about his public perception, but he comes across as very ignorant about immigration and the relationship between Australia and this deal in particular. He seemed unprepared for the phone call.
Yeah, well, I believe that part's true. Let's talk about the leak itself. Here we have another moment where the Trump administration is being undone. And forget about, again, I'll acknowledge to everybody, without the BSing here, this doesn't become a story. But if you're going to BS, make sure everyone on your team is on board with the BSing. He's being undone from within. And here's another leak. Sessions the other day said he's going to go after these leakers and bust these people. They thought it was Reince Priebus. They made a big deal about running him out of town. How big a problem is this leaking, Jonathan?
It's a big problem. The interesting thing that I find is that these phone calls happened within the first few weeks of the administration. Mm-hmm. And so that was 6 months ago, right?
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is that these aren't actually transcripts. They're sets of notes that were taken by the aides that were there for the conversation. So one of two things happened. Either A, these notes are significantly detailed and have just recently been leaked, or they were leaked at the time and the media has been sitting on them. Well, so if the media has been sitting on these for that period of time, what else have they been sitting on? And are they just collecting leaks in order to release them whenever they feel like it's necessary?
Am I crazy here? And maybe this is going to sound nuts, Frank, but someone needs to go to jail. If I'm the Trump administration, I got to lock somebody up. I've got to lock somebody up. I've got to get some charges. I've got to forget about whether or not leaking's bad or good or whatever. the simple fact is, this is a federal crime.
And
you got to lock somebody up to make this stop, right?
It's very disconcerting. Now, I think we're completely in the right to be bowled over by the content of these calls, the fact that he's lied, and the fact that he comes across as incompetent. But that doesn't change the fact that you have conversation between the President of the United States, conversations between the President and other world leaders that are being leaked. That's not a good thing. The President and other world leaders need to be able to converse freely. And if they know everything that's being said could potentially leak out tomorrow, they're not going to be able to.
They'll be less likely to say anything. So, Jonathan, you said, I believe, the leaks are the bigger story. Frank, I feel like you think that's the same thing. The leaks are the bigger overall issue.
I think they're co-headliners. They're both
But the reason I say that is because Trump BS's is not really a very interesting headline. We already get that. The fact that there are more leaks, maybe that's not really news either. So,
well, I think his ignorance and incompetence illustrated in the conversations is actually more concerning to me than him BSing.
Okay, so Jonathan thinks it's the leaks. So you think it's the content of the leaks. I'll go with Jonathan on this one. Let's move on to the second story. I feel like and hope that this will be the last time we discuss former Senator Jeff Sessions, now the current Attorney General, because I want him to remain the Attorney General. So when I hear that General Kelly, the new Chief of Staff, has basically said that Jeff Sessions is safe, I feel good about this. Frank, is this the end of the drama here? I mean, this has been an arc that has gone on for a couple weeks here, none of it good for anybody involved. Is this the end of this drama?
I wouldn't count on it.
Okay.
I think Trump is like a toddler who's been put in timeout by General Kelly on this issue, and as soon as General Kelly is gone or not looking, he's going to run back out and probably get. He can't control himself on Twitter.
So you don't think this is it? You think? I mean, Kelly coming out and saying he's safe, which he shouldn't even have to do, but he did. You think this is just a temporary reprieve until the next time Trump gets alone with his cell phone?
We're so early into this administration. I mean, and the investigation it seems like it's just ramping up. I would be very surprised if we don't see Donald Trump making some sort of comments that shoot himself in the foot on this.
Jonathan, Jeff Sessions, obviously one of Alabama's favorites, and we've watched as Alabamians have taken this a little bit personally. They also like Donald Trump, and I think a lot of people in Alabama would like a reprieve of this, and Jeff Sessions to stay right where he is. Are you like Frank? You think this is just a small reprieve, or is this the end?
Yeah, It goes to show you that there are now finally some adults in the White House, right? Jeff Sessions was one of the few people that has been pushing the Trump agenda, and you can disagree, or you can agree or disagree with the Trump agenda if you want to. The fact remains that Sessions was the only one at the time that he was being accosted by Trump on Twitter that was doing his job, right? And now that you've got Kelly in the White House, you finally have got people in the White House that are also going to do that, and I hope that it's the end, but I do agree with Frank that it's not going to be.
During the conversation, Kelly reportedly stressed that the White House remains supportive of Sessions and wanted him to continue his job. So Kelly sort of came out and took the position that, hey, things are calming down, adult in the room, that kind of stuff. But we still haven't heard Trump say anything nice about Sessions. We still haven't heard Trump sort of put this thing to bed. He's got to do that before this thing is completely over, right, Frank?
Well, certainly he would have to do that. But, I mean, he could come out and say it's all been put to bed and then bring it up the next night or a week later or a month later. So I don't think we'll ever have any assurance until it's actually over that it's over.
Okay. All right. Moving on. Back to the state of Alabama. I don't know about you guys, but when I went to school, I really felt that it was much later than now. Madison County and Huntsville in North Alabama are already back to school, and this is not sitting well with the state lawmaker. Craig Ford, he is a Democratic lawmaker from Gadsden, has come out and said, we need a law. That's sort of the solution to every little problem that we have. We need a law. We need a law. We've seen this in the past where they wanted to regulate the vacation so more people would go to the beach, and the state got involved in this. And a lot of people wondered, why are we doing this? Well, the state lawmaker, state representative, Craig Ford from Gadsden says he wants a law that requires like 12 weeks of summer. And he wants to make sure that we don't go back as soon as we did. He writes this: instead of spending the last weeks of August working summer jobs or on family vacations, teachers and students are preparing to head back to school. Why? It wasn't always that way. Now, I've been an advocate of year-round school, which I'm sure kids will love. I've been an advocate of year-round school from the very beginning. I believe there is a brain drain, and I think the idea of these giant breaks for absolutely no reason, it's not like the kids are out in the field like originally was set up. But is he on to something? Is this way too early? It seems way early, and I know neither of you guys have kids, nor do I, but this seems way early. Jonathan, do we need a law?
The only reason to have a law for this is economic development for Gulf Shores. That was the entire reason for the 2012 bill, which I find really interesting that as soon as the Republicans get in, they pass a bill to increase summer vacation so that it increases economic development in South Alabama. And so once that expired, you now have kids going to school earlier. And really the answer should be that the local district should decide when the kids go back to school.
So you want local control 100%?
I think local control is the right answer. Personally, I agree with you. It should be year round.
Yeah,
Because Common Core did not work in the state of Alabama. Something's got to be done in order to bridge the gap between the Alabama education system and the rest of the country and the rest of the world. And if Common Core is not the answer, something else has to be.
And I honestly believe that if we went to some sort of year-round school, and this is a different topic, but went to a different type of year-round school, maybe in between the quarters, you had like 2 weeks or something, as opposed to these gigantic breaks. That law in 2012, it mandated that school could not start earlier than the Monday 2 weeks before Labor Day and last no longer than the Friday immediately before Memorial Day. The longer break, more tourism, etc. Frank, you're from Winston County. I think they have schools down there. So talk to me about how
you do, and some very intelligent people.
Okay, all right. So present company excluded. So
that's right.
How would you, if you were king of Alabama, how would you handle this?
Well, first of all, I don't want to be king of Alabama,
okay.
And I don't think we need a king controlling this. So I don't think a new law is necessary. I do think it's interesting. You and Jonathan raised the point of why do we have such long summer vacations? Well, it's a holdover from a time when most children in the state were in families that were working on farms, and you get fall break and spring break to harvest and to plant, and that's just not the world that we live in anymore. So I think that would be a more responsible way to change up how school is done. Also, this idea that suddenly if kids have more weeks at the end of summer, that they're just going to be doing super constructive things, I think it means more time with the PlayStation, more time with the Nintendo, more likely.
Yeah, Ford also said that there are numerous benefits to longer summer breaks. What are they?
Economic development in South Alabama.
Is that it? He mentions professional development, the ability for older students to more easily work summer jobs, and cost savings of the high utility costs related to summer heat.
His position would make so much more sense if kids could vote.
Yeah,
be appealing to a constituency.
No, I agree. If he was playing to 13 to 17
I think he's got the middle school vote locked up here.
Maybe this is the path that Democrats get back. Jonathan.
The other thing that I looked into was school days, a number of days that other countries are using. And so if you look at India and China, there's significantly more school days, but the hours that are attended classes are similar. So the school days are shorter, but there's more days in the school year. And that may not be a bad idea.
People talk about it. They rank us with China and all these other countries, and they say there's a bunch of different reasons. One thing that we all often forget is in China and in some of these other countries, if you don't hit a certain level, they cull you from the school system. So when they say that their schools are doing so much better, it's because they take the lower performers out and put them into iPhone factories, for lack of a better term. And not necessarily iPhone factories, but essentially they take them out and they put them into the workforce. And that's a little bit different here. All right, moving on to the last topic of this segment. The Senate race has been an interesting one. It's been a race to say who loves Trump more than anyone. But what we haven't seen in this race is the normal Republican Party politics where we argue who's the most conservative. Because you can't say I love Trump the most and Trump's the most conservative, therefore I'm the most conservative. You haven't really seen this until recently. Congressman Mo Brooks has rounded up the endorsements of what he refers to as conservative thought leaders. And these are talk show hosts and commentators, Mark Levin, Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, and Ann Coulter. These are people who command large audiences in the state of Alabama. These are people who are well-known conservatives. And if you say, I have their support, you, by proxy, you can argue I'm the most conservative here. Are you surprised that he would go to people, Frank, like these individuals, these conservative firebrands, so to speak, and tout their endorsement? I don't think you'd see this in a Massachusetts or something.
No, certainly not in Massachusetts, but I think it's smart politics in Alabama. And wouldn't you include Dale Jackson in
no,
list?
listen, I've endorsed Mo Brooks, just like my fellow airmates, Mark Levin on WVNN, and Sean Hannity used to be in Athens.
Airmates, is that a technical
I don't know
term?
what I'm trying to my coworkers, my colleagues, I don't know how to put it. But you know, it's funny, Mo Brooks knew Sean Hannity. When Mo Brooks filled in for Sean Hannity before he got there, he filled a gap before Hannity arrived. And they knew each other since like 1990. So they actually know each other, and there's a little bit of a history there. But so in a Republican primary, these voices help. I mean, and if the argument is you're a never Trumper, well, at least 3 of the 4 of these folks, with the exception of Levin, have been huge Trump supporters.
Yeah.
And I would argue Levin's sort of like me, I think, when he yells a lot. But besides that, he's also like me in the sense that was never a huge Trump fan, but he likes the policies and would like to see him succeed. The rest of these guys are huge Trump fans. So, I mean, this shores up the whole never Trump argument. He says, well, these guys support me.
Yeah, I think if you look at how the support came through, it seems to me that Mo wasn't out there searching for this support, right? So, at least from Levin, because that's the guy that I listen to, it's an attack on McConnell. So McConnell apparently went off and changed the law so that he could raise more money to oppose candidates in primary elections that weren't already there. So it's not necessarily Mo Brooks going out and looking for support from these guys. It's these guys coming and supporting Mo Brooks because of what Mo Brooks stands for.
I'm intrigued by that. Levin, definitely. There's no question about it. Like I said, he airs on the radio station I'm on. And it's an anti-McConnell thing. I mean, absolutely. But a lot of people don't know this. Mark Levin has ties to North Alabama in Huntsville as well, some familial ties and things of that nature. So I think they know each other as well. But I think you're right there. Is this a pro-Trump? Is this an anti-McConnell? Is this a pro-Brooks thing? Does it matter?
All of the above?
Yeah.
I mean, I think they all come into play here. It is so bizarre it makes sense how much the election is focusing on Trump instead of traditional in years past conservative values, family values. It is bizarre.
All right.
I mean, you can disagree with Brooks all you want. The fact is that he's running a campaign with a significant amount of integrity. And Strange is not.
And that's another hook he's using, and I think Levin has pointed that out repeatedly in his arguments. All right, when we come back, grand jury in panel. We got a legal expert here, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Stay tuned. You're watching Yellowhammer TV Live. Welcome back to Yellowhammer TV Live. As I said in the beginning of the show, this is either the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning of the Trump-Russia saga. A grand jury has been impaneled. We've got a legal expert, Frank Ward, here, also Jonathan Breckenridge, an aerospace engineer. But I'm a little bit of an expert on this as well, because a lot of people don't know, I was the subject of a grand jury investigation, and I'll use my own personal experience here to say, you can impanel a grand jury for anything. That's the easiest. I mean, Frank, I'm right here.
Right.
If you want to impanel a grand jury and you have the ability to do so, all you have to do is call it. I mean, is that fair?
I think it is a little bit overblown, the significance of this. I mean, it's important, but it's a tool that special counsel is using to get testimony and other evidence.
Yeah, and that's another point here. this may not be about anything in particular, but it is a weapon. I mean, you're weaponizing the justice system, which is, there's nothing wrong with it. This is part of the game.
I would say tool instead of weapon.
Okay, all right, so it's a tool.
But if you're on the other end of it, I'm sure it does feel like a weapon.
Trust me, as someone who's been on the other end, and there's another thing I'd like to point out before we move on. There is no consequence to failing at a grand jury. If you call a grand jury and they don't return an indictment or anything like that, you just move on. And then there's no double jeopardy. There's no anything. And again,
it's a preliminary.
Right, but you could do it 100 times. You could impanel a grand jury 100 times to go after the same thing. In your business, there's the saying, you can indict a ham sandwich if you wanted to make the argument. I've been in a grand jury where I was the target, where they intentionally tanked the case. They were trying to use it as leverage. When they realized it wasn't, they just killed it, and that was the end of it. What do you think this is? Is this a big deal, or is this no deal?
I think it's somewhere in the middle. I mean, I don't think it means that criminal charges are about to come out at any time. I mean, we could see. Who knows exactly what's going on behind the scenes? It is a significant step in the investigation, but I don't think we should read too much into it at this point.
Jonathan, big deal, no deal? Forget about the legal wrangling. I'm not going to ask you about that. But in the aura of public opinion, big deal, no deal?
So from a political perspective, I think it's a huge deal. I mean, you've got...
It just feeds that narrative.
There's no obvious crime that has been committed, or at least no evidence that's been provided to convince at least me that there's been an obvious crime that's been committed. And now this grand jury can be pulled up for whatever reason anytime they want to. I mean, I understand that that's the way the law works, but from a political perspective, you're doing this to a sitting president simply because the opposite party doesn't like the policies that he's coming forward with.
Well,
this is a political move.
And that's exactly. And here's two things you said are true. It's a big deal because it's happening to a sitting president, so it explodes the importance, or at least have the appearance of importance. It makes it seem much bigger. And it looks like it's targeted. Frank, you're squirming in your chair over there.
I agree to a certain extent with Jonathan. There's no doubt that there's a political element. Anytime you have a sitting president who's involved in these types of things. But that doesn't mean that the investigation is illegitimate. Anytime you have anything involving a president, it's going to involve politics.
Deal, yeah. So I guess the question here, Jonathan, is does this hurt Trump with his supporters, or do they just bunker in even more?
I think they bunker in. Everything that I've seen with the Trump supporters, anytime the president's been attacked, it's fresh red meat for the base.
And I think what the base really wants is evidence. They want to. If this is going to drag on, we've had it going on 7 months now. What they want is evidence. And Frank, the chance that this is going to produce some smoking gun is probably pretty small.
Maybe. I don't know. I do think it's interesting. You talked about how the base is going to react. I grew up in a conservative area with a conservative family, and I do remember, this is back in the 80s, so not too long, a decade after Nixon. And I do know there were a lot of people who thought Nixon got a raw deal.
Up until the end.
Even after that, there were people, Nixon wasn't that bad.
Okay.
So even if there is a smoking gun, I think there's a certain segment of the base that'll go, whatever happened was justified to beat Hillary.
When the tapes broke on Nixon, and I was speaking to Dr. Burke about this the other day, there was a nosedive in popularity. I mean, once there was like a piece of something tangible as opposed to what looked like just political noise, there was a nosedive. So if something comes out, this is going to be a really big problem.
And I think you see that nosedive happen a lot steeper with the Trump administration if there's actual evidence.
How? It's already at 33%. How much further can it possibly go amongst the base?
The base. Yeah. The base that is currently supporting him will, I think, leave.
They'll flee.
They'll flee faster than they did
if
for
there's
Nixon.
Something. Okay, I agree with that. When we come back, we'll wrap up the show. We'll wrap up the week. We'll figure out what the biggest story of the day is for these guys. Stay tuned. It's Yellowhammer TV. Welcome back to Yellowhammer TV Live. Let's talk about what's important to us. What's the biggest story of the day as we wrap up the week? Jonathan, you're up first. What's the biggest story of the day for you?
So the biggest story for me today is that a new company called Vector, which is run by some ex-SpaceX guys, are now launching small satellites into space for 1/20th of the cost that SpaceX is doing it.
Wow.
So I think we've got a new space race going on between private companies with SpaceX, Blue Origin, and now Vector.
Do you specifically choose? We'll talk about it later. Always space stuff with Jonathan. Frank, give me something.
This is going to be much lower. This is really sad, actually. Dunkin' Donuts is toying with the idea of getting rid of the name Donuts in their name and just going to Dunkin'. I think that's a tragedy.
Is that part of their sloganing anyway? Like rely on Dunkin' or something like that?
America runs on Dunkin'.
There you go. Are they paying you? What's going on here? All right, the most important thing of the day, the biggest news for me is Mobile is doing something that I think is pretty unique. They're telling people who have they're telling people who have fines that if they cannot pay their fines, now all they have to do is 10 hours or community service. And for every hour of community service they do, that's $10. So I think this is a good way to get away incarcerating people for fines and things like this. You tell them you can go do community service. Let's see more people do that. Hey, thanks for watching Yellowhammer TV Live. We'll be back next week.